So is it working?
If you go to next slide, how does that?
Voilà.
Yeah,
So comme ça. Okay, good.
okay. That was the problem we had last time. Yeah.
Mm. Mhm.
Okay, I think, Rin, with that we are ready, right?
I think so, yes. Let's go.
Okay, good. So hi, Rin. Hi, everyone. Rin, every time we look where we sit, where do you sit now and who is next to you?
Okay, great. Very nice to see you all. And this is Rin again. This is the third time that we are doing this course. And welcome everybody. I'm sitting in my office meeting room with our intern Yu Hai Chuan, who just arrived here, so that she's helping me to run this session together. So that here she is.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you.
Okay. So yeah, over to you, Priska. Where are you now?
I'm actually at my workplace today. So last time I was at my political workplace, and this time I'm at my office as you know, I'm a social work practitioner. So we have here in Bern in Switzerland a small organization in the area of care farming. I hope my colleagues will not interrupt us. They should know, but you never know. So Rin, we usually start by looking back to last session and how the topics we had, things we remember, but also maybe some other colleagues who are in here who attended last session might also want to say a few words. But first, you and me could have a short look back on the content of last session. And then others who want to say something, things they remember, just raise your hand and we can really open your microphone. Rin, what do you remember of last week's session?
Last week's session, we have Wan Hee Lee, who was presenting the UN human rights mechanisms, the whole structure. So that the one structure is from the UN human rights, the conventions and covenants. So that is we called the treaty-based or the mechanisms, and then the others are from the resolutions of the United Nations. So that the charter-based or the mechanisms, we call it the treaty bodies that are looking after the implementation of 9 main UN human rights treaties plus one optional protocol on the prevention of torture. And then the charter-based the mechanisms, we were looking into the Human Rights Council, the most important body, intergovernmental body of UN human rights mechanisms. And then under the UN Human Rights Council, there are two subsidiary mechanisms. One is special procedures, and the other one is universal periodic reviews. And then, so basically, these four, the Human Rights Council, treaty bodies, UPR, and the special procedures are the main UN human rights mechanisms. But there are some other relevant, mechanisms that are also dealing with the human rights, including the ILO, the International Labor Organizations, experts mechanisms, and even the Security Council or other bodies of UN Assembly are also dealing with the UN human rights issues as well. And then so that I think that the colleagues can look into the presentations and recording for more details. And then Wani particularly articulated the kind of the definition that we are trying to redefine the social workers and then their roles and in terms of the human rights is that we have like the 5 redefined the roles of the social workers. The first is right holders as right holders, and second as a duty bearers. The third as a human rights enablers. The fourth is the facilitators for human rights, and then the fifth is the human rights defenders. So I think that this is also related, and then we, a little bit dive into what each of these functions are and what needs to be done and what we should understand. So that was a little bit one layer deeper than the previous session, I believe. And then I think that this time, through the Rose presentation, I think we go a little bit deeper, looking into the rights of social workers, so that it's just go one by one, deeper layer, so that we are so much. I'm so much looking forward to that presentation, and then the presentation was about the ethics, the commission, so that the linkage between the ethics of social workers and the human rights framework. From my perspective, it was very impressive and important how the human rights issues are also linked to the code of conduct of social workers. So this is deeply entrenched in the ethics of social workers. And then she also shared some examples in the UK when the ethic issues arise in the daily work of social workers. So that was also very interesting. And then also from our side, from human rights perspective, to look into those issues from the human rights framework and how to utilize the UN human rights mechanisms to address those issues. So that there was a good interlinkage between the two components, communicating and connecting each other. So I stop here. So over to you, Priska. Is there anything else that you want to add?
There's nothing to add. That was a wonderful summary. And I share with you this wonderful linkage through ethics from the profession to the OHCHR and the human rights framework. When I found really striking that one of those PowerPoint presentation, that one of those slides she shared was that the key themes she said was to conduct what actions are regarded as right and wrong, the character, what moral quality and are regarded as good or bad, then a relationship, what responsibilities do we have to each other, and then society, what kind of society do we want to live in? And raising all those questions is what you said, Rin, is a really good linkage between human rights and seeing as supporter of human rights and realizer of human rights and catalyzer of this change that we are looking for, and linking also the professional background and values that we have. So it's I found that brings us closer. Each session brings us closer to deepen the understanding of the really strong connection that we have. And I think with that, as you said before, with Rose Henderson, we have this part of social workers as rights holders. And we can learn from Rose, who is a really, really experienced IFSW member and representative in various forms. Really valuable what all you do for IFSW and I could not end with thank you for also building up this new commission. I think pass it to you, Rose. We don't summarize the whole CV of someone, but we thank you warmly for giving us some insights on that. And Rin will show the presentation. And then while Rin is preparing that and Rose is starting her microphone, just for everyone, we listen now her presentation. Afterwards, we'll have social work practitioners. And during all those times, you can write your questions and comments in the chat box. We will work with that later on. And you're invited to contribute later on. But here now, right now, we let Rose present her slides. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Prishka and Arin. It's really great to be part of these sessions. A very good evening from Aotearoa, New Zealand, which is where I am based. Good morning to those of you in different parts of the world. Good afternoon, good evening, good night. I always feel like I'm a little bit of a time traveler in these sorts of international forums, because I'm talking to you at about just after 9 o'clock at night, but for you it's sort of 11 o'clock in the morning and earlier in some parts of the globe. So good morning, good evening. As Prishka alluded to, I've been involved with IFSW in various forms for quite a while now, and mainly, or initially, that was through the Asia Pacific region, where I was the global vice president, and then the regional vice president, and then the regional president. And for a period of time, I was also the global vice president of IFSW. So I'm not saying that I've got any particularly more expertise than anybody else, but I've certainly been benefited from being able to be part of the organisation for some time now. So tonight I'm just wanting to share with you a little bit about IFSW and the Human Rights Commission and where we are at with reviewing that, and obviously very, very keen to hear any feedback, any thoughts, any ideas that you might have that we can incorporate in our work going forward. So just by way of background, IFSW Human Rights Commission was established in 1988, and it was established at that point to support social workers who were under threat because of they were pursuing their social work professional responsibilities. In 1996, so that's almost 30 years ago now, so it is quite a long time ago, at the general meeting in 1996, the human rights policy was approved, and that policy included the following quite comprehensive dimensions related to human rights. The first one was, of course, life. The value of life is central to human rights work. Social workers have not only to resist violations of human rights which threaten or diminish the quality of life, but also actively to promote life-enhancing and nurturing activities. Physical and psychological well-being is an important aspect of the quality of life. The deterioration of the environment and the non-existence of curtailment of health programs also threaten life. Social workers assert the right of individuals and communities to have protection from preventable disease and disability. The second aspect was freedom and liberty. All human beings are born free, and the fundamental freedoms include the right to liberty, to freedom from slavery, to freedom from arbitrary arrest, torture, cruel, inhumane or degrading treatment, and freedom of thought and speech. Next to life itself, freedom and liberty are the most precious human values, asserting the worth of human existence. The next aspect was related to equality and non-discrimination. The fundamental principle of equality is closely linked to principles of justice. Every person, regardless of birth, gender, age, race, disability, colour, language, religious or political beliefs, property, sexual orientation, status, or social class, has a right to equal treatment and protection under the law. Social workers have to ensure equal access to public services and social welfare provision in accordance with the resources of national and local governments, and have a particular responsibility to combat discrimination of any kind in their own practice. In justice, every person has a right to protection against arbitrary arrest or interference with privacy and to equal protection under the law. Where laws have been violated. Sorry?
I'm turning off microphone of someone. It's okay. If someone interferes, I'm going and stop that. You can continue.
Okay, thanks, Priska. Where laws have been violated, every person has a right to a prompt and fair trial by an objective judicial authority. Those convicted are entitled to humane treatment, whose purpose is to secure the reform and social readaptation of the individual. The impartial operation of the law is a crucial safeguard for the citizen in the administration of justice. Social justice, however, requires more than a legal system untainted by interference by the executive. It requires the satisfaction of basic human needs and the equitable distribution of resources. It requires universal access to healthcare and education, thus enabling the achievement of human potential. It underpins concepts of social development. In the pursuit of social justice, workers may have to face conflict with powerful elite groups in any given society. The next aspect was solidarity. Every person whose fundamental freedoms are infringed has a right to support from fellow citizens. The concept of solidarity recognises the fraternity, a bit patriarchal there, sorry, but it was 1996, the ideal of the French Revolution and the importance of mutual support. Social workers give expression to this through the Human Rights Commission in relation to social workers whose political freedoms are infringed. In their daily practice, they express solidarity with the poor and oppressed. Poverty, hunger, and homelessness are violations of human rights. Social workers stand with the disadvantaged in campaigning for social justice. And social responsibility. Social responsibility is the recognition that each of us has a responsibility to family, to community, to nation, and to the world community to contribute personal talents, energy, and commitment to the advancement of human rights. Those with intellectual and physical resources should utilise them to assist those less well equipped. Social work's engagement with the disadvantaged is a reflection of that responsibility. No person or collective body has the right to engage in any activity, including propaganda, to incite war, hostility, hatred, bigotry, or violence, contrary to the institution and maintenance of human rights. Peace and non-violence. Peace is more than the absence of organised conflict. It is the goal of achieving harmony with self and with others. Social workers are committed to the pursuit of non-violence. Their experience in conflict resolution teaches that mediation and arbitration are effective instruments to overcome seemingly irreconcilable differences. Non-violence does not mean passivity in the face of injustice. Social workers will resist and exercise non-violent pressure for change, but will not engage in acts of violence in the course of their professional activity. Social workers devote its energies to constructive efforts to achieve social justice. And the last one in that policy is related to the environment. Humankind has trusteeship responsibility for the care of the planet. Environmental degradation poses a threat to life itself in some areas and to the quality of life in many countries. False development models based on industrialization, the unequal distribution of resources, excessive consumerism, and ignorance of the consequences of pollution have all contributed to this global plight. Social workers need to work with community groups in tackling the consequences of environmental decline and destruction. As you can see, this policy drafted in and approved in 1996 was clearly quite broad and inclusive, and perhaps arguably, but I'm sure unintentionally, has caused some confusion for the work of the Human Rights Commission. The next slide, please. Thank you. There have been several Human Rights Commissioners. My apologies if I've inadvertently omitted anyone, but we've had Terry Bamford, the late Terry Bamford, Nigel Hoare, Ruth Stark, who was a previous global president of IFSW, then Colleen Lundy, then Xanthus Suarez Garcia. Of course, they were also supported by many representatives across all of the regions over the years. And together they produced, or they supported the production of many public statements, which are on our IFSW website, and various posters to promote human rights, including the Human Rights Day, which is often early part of December, but also various activities around the globe. Statements on human rights issues, they've included the refugee crisis, particularly as a consequence of war and violence in the last few years, but beyond that as well. The LGBTQI peoples and Indigenous rights, but many others as well over the years. Next slide, thank you. So over the years, the Commission evolved into holding a much broader purpose than the original intent. And without a clear focus of the work, in many ways, the Commission became a bit bogged down and struggled with the complexity of it all. And I think many people got quite frustrated. It was without any disrespect intended that in 2022, the IFSW executive disbanded the Commission and asked if I would work alongside the Secretary General and the other commissioners to review the purpose of the Human Rights Commission and make some suggestions to the executive and to the general meeting. It's also noteworthy that about the same time as this was happening, there were several other significant developments within IFSW. And these include the establishment of the Indigenous Commission, the development and publication of the People's Charter, and the growth and strengthening of all of our commissions globally and regionally. It's also important to note that we're continuing to grow and develop to seek to work much more collaboratively across the commissions rather than having them operate in separate silos. Each commission rightfully has a role in each other's primary focus, making this aspect of IFSW's operational arm an increasingly valuable asset to us all. When we work together, we are so much more than the sum of our parts, to misquote Aristotle. And this series of webinars is an example of the benefits of a commission's working together. As we've heard over the past two sessions, those of you who've been able to stick with us in the previous ones, for the purposes of the work, we've identified these 5 dimensions of how social workers and human rights are connected, as Rin summarised at the beginning of tonight's session. And it is the first of these, social workers as human rights holders, that is the focus of the proposed new Commission for Social Workers' Rights. Next one. Thank you. It's important to underline that human rights is central to all of us as social workers. It's in our DNA. A new commission is not in any way to detract from this. It's in our definition of social work, it's in our code of ethics. All of us participate in human rights all the time. So the commission is not intended to get in the way of that. And similarly, national professional bodies engage in many human rights advocacy activities within their own countries with respect to concerns that they hold for their own jurisdiction and for other parts of the globe. And again, this commission is not intended to in any way get in the way of that. As we've heard and continue to learn about, the United Nations has an established structure and network to work globally on human rights issues and abuses more broadly. And strengthening our partnership with this mechanism is a vital part of our ongoing development. So the focus of this new proposed commission is when social workers as human rights holders have their rights denied or abused when they are undertaking professional social work activities. The proposed new name is more explicit about this deliberately. The key rationale for the tighter focus, which does align to the original focus of this commission, is that if IFSW does not provide a mechanism for supporting social workers whose rights as social workers have been abused, then no one else is acting to protect them in these situations. We also note that for many, local associations are often compromised or unable to provide advocacy in some of these situations as well. So again, it's important for IFSW to be able to pick that up in those cases. So how might this commission work? So some examples of how social worker rights or violations may have happened would include when a social worker is arrested or persecuted when they are professionally advocating for other people's rights, for example. And we have had examples in the past where in some parts of the world where homosexuality is illegal, social workers have been advocating for their rights because our code of rights or ethical principles, expect social workers to do that without judgment. And so there are some times when the social worker acting professionally has been in conflict with the government of their country. Another example is where we're expected to work in conditions which mean it's not possible for the social worker to effectively carry out their professional role. Now, I'm certainly not meaning where, you don't have a big office for yourself or anything like that. These are quite extreme situations where some social workers are perhaps being asked to be agents of the state. Perhaps they're unable to have the independence that that we expect of them, and again in our ethical principles. So those are some of the examples that we're thinking. How would we find out about that? At this stage, we are thinking, and of course, there's a lot of work that still needs to go into developing this, but our initial thoughts might be that we receive a notification from a member organisation or from an individual practitioner. And then we need to go through a process of validation around the information that we receive. Those of you who were fortunate enough to be with us on our first session in this series may recall the research project that our Education Commissioner Vasilius and his colleagues have on the Social Workers at Risk database. And should this proposal be ratified, then I think there would be some really good merit in connecting formally with that research group to see how we might be able to benefit from that work. What sorts of things might we be able to do? Our action plans could include, of course, making public statements, which we continue to do. We may be able to form partnerships with and alliances with other bodies to pressure relevant government or the authority to be taking a different action or understanding a different view. And in some instances, we may be able to provide some access to legal representation as required. So those are just some of the examples of what we might be able to do. Thank you. So whereabouts are we at with all of this? We did propose the new Commission for Social Workers' Rights to the Executive in 2023, and then more recently, just in April, we presented that to the IFSW General Meeting in Panama. We are having a final round of submissions that will close at the end of May. So member organisations have been invited to send any further feedback so that we can consider that. We will review the feedback and revise the proposal as whatever we receive. And then we'll be expecting to put our final recommendation in a report to the Global Executive in the not too distant future, in June or July, after we've considered the submissions. If the Executive then support the work, there will be some further implementation, I guess, work to undertaken to refine some of those areas that I touched on just before, and to develop the processes and guidelines, how we get referrals and how it's validated and what we do. So there's just a wee bit of that operationalizing or implementing of a new commission that would need to happen. And I think that might be the last one. Yes, so that's just a really quick overview of where the IFSW human rights, and now we're looking at the IFSW Rights of Social Workers Commission is at. Thank you. Back to you, Priska. Or Rin.
Thank you so much, Rin. Yes, wonderful presentation. A good overview for all of us, how it was developed and what a long-standing history Human Rights Commission has within IFSW, and the linkage again with OHCHR. Thank you so much. Rin, I think we see again how we are closely bounded, and also in history, and on the IFSW website you could also see the history. They're still putting on new documents on the history of social work and IFSW, and that it has become consultative status at the UN in 1959. So I think that already shows the importance, but there's plenty more of information available.
Sorry, please. Yeah.
Rin, you mentioned this wonderful idea to have the presentation of the social workers, like for the whole audience, not in the groups, so that we can learn most of it. So I think that we should do that, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Thank you again, Rose, for this fantastic, presentation. And once again, that reinforced the messages that we've been, sending, from IFSW and OHCHR to, join the linkage between the framework for social work and the framework for human rights. And one thing that was a stick into my mind during your presentation, that we shouldn't be working in silo. We should work together, in partnership. And I think that this course is a good example to link, to break those silos. So it is started from the human UN Commission, and then involving the new coming commission on the social workers' rights, and also linking up to the Indigenous Peoples Commission for the next session. So I think that it is expanding the flow to other commissions so that we
Rose, would you like to add?
can all join together to that. As we highlighted that there are several layers and dimensions of the work and social workers' role in terms of the human rights, but the rights of social workers are also very important. That shouldn't be neglected or disregarded because they are helping others. So that I think that the purpose of this the commission is really important. And also there are many layers as you mentioned, at the local, national, regional, and international level to promote and protect the rights of social workers. Because we know that social workers are under constant, the threat for many different regions, and then in many different settings as well. And then for carrying out their own work, at the same time for helping those people in need to enjoy their life. The LGBTIQ community is one example, and migrant workers, and the persons with the disabilities, and that there are plenty of examples in this regard, I believe. So that thank you so much, and then over to you, Priska, so that we can invite colleagues.
Rin, for us, it's so meaningful to have your support, to have US representative of OHCHR really bridging these two bodies together. And I'm sure that Rose will bring this message also to the discussion that we have. So thank you so much. Here we have in the chat the 3 names of our social work colleagues. All of them approached me during this course, so we haven't had any earlier collaboration. And with Sonali and Bianca, I had a short virtual conversation this week, not with Papi. I'm really glad to see all of you in here. You are social work practitioner in different areas. And you have shown interest in sharing your insight. And so we were speaking about bridging your experience with OHCHR and IFSW, this global local exchange. And the initial idea was to have that in the groups, but I think you're all capable to present part of your work, your understanding of social work and human rights as a human rights profession. And all of you could have around 5, not more than 7 minutes to speak, but if it's shorter, then no problem. And we will have afterwards the group where you will be put automatically, so you don't have to choose the groups. That's sometimes a bit complicated. So we will begin with Sonali Owen. She's a social work practitioner. She is based in Australia, and she's professional in the area of child protection. So Sonali, please say more about you and your work. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Priska, and everyone for having me here today. And Rose, I don't quite know how to follow on from that incredible presentation, but I found myself just taking avid notes as you were sharing. So yes, I'm a social worker. I guess a little bit about me. I've got some slides, Priska, but I'm thinking perhaps with 7 minutes, I'll put them up. Put them up.
Yeah.
But
do you want us to help? Or
I think I'm okay. Can we see my slides?
yes.
Yeah, okay. Lovely. So just I guess a little bit about me. I am of Sri Lankan heritage. I find myself living and kind of working in Australia. I'm sort of sitting in the international development space. So I've had the absolute privilege of working with and alongside advocates around gender equality and social inclusion and child protection and safeguarding, specifically across the Pacific region, focused mainly in Tuvalu, PNG, and the Federated States of Micronesia. I guess just really quickly thinking about ways of working. So thinking, I guess, Priska, have I got these sort of key ideas and reflections right? These are sort of the areas that we're thinking about today. So the human rights mechanisms that I've sort of come across, and what do partnerships and sort of networking, what does that look like, and what sort of unique contribution do we bring, and what sort of action points I guess do we want to be suggesting that global bodies take up. So that's what we'll be reflecting on in the smaller groups. But I guess just quickly some things about the way that I work. Is I find myself as a social worker often working in multidisciplinary teams, or really in close collaboration with people that perhaps have different goals around what they're doing in the spaces that I find myself in. And I have always, when I've been working away from home, had a copy of the Australian Association of Social Workers Code of Ethics, a paper copy sitting at my desk, as a way of reminding me and grounding me in I guess what I uniquely bring to the picture and to the dialogue. And I guess I've just put up some key points that really resonate with me, being a person of Sri Lankan heritage living in Australia, feeling that I've got connection to different places, cultural responsiveness, understandings around values, beliefs, spirituality, I guess the idea of kinship, communal bonds, and definitely those social justice and human rights principles resonate really well with me at a personal and professional level. So just to kind of acknowledge that the AASW do quite overtly link in with principles and ideas of the international framework. And yeah, won't sort of speak too much about that. Other than to say, yeah, I do find that I guess some things that I think about in my practice is what are the specific human rights instruments, the international frameworks that are relevant to the country, the context, the space that I'm working in. So when thinking about safeguarding or protection, perhaps I might return and refresh myself around, well, what is it that the Convention on the Rights of the Child tell me specifically about, for example, best interest principles, and what that could look like in practice. Thinking as well, I guess, as a social worker, about the role of reflecting on ideas of best practice versus best fit approaches, and sort of honouring the role of evidence research, absolutely, and kind of connecting that in with what is happening at a grassroots level in the communities and with the people that we are working with. Cultural responsiveness, I think I've spoken to that a little bit already. That's something that I think is really important in thinking about implementation of human rights. Human rights based social work, thinking particularly around the role of what it might look like to think about pre-existing Indigenous practices and ways of thinking and living and being, things like honouring spirituality and faith within dialogue around rights-based practice, and particularly really enjoying this idea of collective consciousness. And I've just referenced a recent article from Papua New Guinea that speaks about the connection of that to particularly the women's movement. I'm so sorry, team, if I seem a little bit scattered. I'm just trying to sort of fast track through some of the thoughts that I had. in terms of what we bring as social workers, I think this idea of being a person in the context of broader systems and structures is fantastic. So thinking about the way absolutely our work interacts and engages with the individual, but then how do those groups interrelate, and what can our role look like as being as sort of bumping up against those broader laws, policies, structures. What would it I guess thinking also about the role of locating ourselves within the context of some of this of some of the practices of advocacy, and so I guess what are we bringing with us into these systems that we find ourselves in, and into the relationships that we find ourselves working with. How does yeah, and I guess how do our experiences, connections, values, how might that be impacting the way that we're working, and the way that we're choosing to talk about rights, for example, and the different narratives that we use to shape conversations with clients or with broader collectives. In terms of social work support, and sort of trying to sort of tie into the incredible talk that Rose just shared with us, thinking about human rights policy and in the context of psychological well-being. I think something again that social work can really bring and speak into this space is, I think we do talk about self-care, but thinking about collective care, and what might it look like to come together and to look after each other as I guess as a group of practitioners, but what might it look like to advocate for organisations and for spaces and places that we find ourselves working, to be thinking about our well-being as practitioners, and the way that would make an impact in the lives of the people and communities we're working with. And this sort of one line around I am my sister's keeper, and again that's in the context of responding to violence against women and girls. I find that quite powerful. So I've just sort of listed that as a resource. It's a magazine sort of put together by JASS, Furia and Raising Voices. I think that's probably, I think again grassroots approaches. We really I think we spearhead and can actually demonstrate in a practical sense what it means to be locally led, and to be able to really be relationship focused in the way that we work with others. I think building bridges and kind of thinking about the benefits and the strengths of international instruments like human rights, like the UN, instruments, which are incredible, but then sort of finding ways to bridge or to kind of create dialogue around, well, what was existing in these cultures and in these communities and in our cultures and our communities before, for example, the UN conventions were in place, and how do we bridge dialogue around overlap, and yeah, it's certainly something that I find really exciting in the work that I do. I think I might just say these are photos that I've taken whilst living overseas in Tuvalu. But I think that's probably it from me.
Sonali, if I may briefly interrupt you, you have made such a wonderful presentation. Take some extra minutes if you need a bit more.
Are you sure?
If you want to say like an example how you did that, like bridging this gap as a practitioner, that is something unique, that is something that we all can learn, like some practical experience from you. I know that you have some of them, and I found that really striking to see. I only see the presentation like preparing, so if you push that button to have it like full size.
Sorry, everyone.
It's maybe only for me, but
no, I feel like it's probably for everyone. I'm quite poor with this with PowerPoints.
Okay, just at the
forgive
bottom.
me.
Yeah, no
problem.
But just take some 1 to 3 minutes to say how you bridge
Okay.
as a practitioner. What was the tool that you used and when you were successful with that?
I think I think if I had to distill it down to some key ideas, For me, it was taking the time to build relationship. I think often in the work that we do, we have position descriptions. We have in the international development context that I work in, often short-term contracts with kind of key goals and ideas and things that need to be developed. I would say oftentimes those KPIs don't include building relationship, but that needs to be, I found, that's invaluable. And it's through conversations and relating in an organic and I think in a way that demonstrates genuine curiosity around people's experiences and priorities. I think about some work that I was privileged to be a part of in Tuvalu, where the team on the ground were looking to develop, or I guess have meaningful conversations around removing corporal punishment from education settings, and we're sort of wrestling with, you know, how do we have these conversations and how do we do this? And absolutely, the UN Convention, you know, the rights of the child, absolutely, that there are parameters, frameworks, there's language in that could be used to demonstrate why that is important. And there's also research that would arguably, you know, state in sort of an international global context that yes, you know, corporal punishment is not linked to great outcomes for children, but through, I guess, dialogue and relationship building and connecting with community, what came out was, whilst those are very valid ways to have the conversation, what was going to make most sense for the people and the families, the teachers, the community, was going to be a conversation that had a faith-based narrative that allowed people to talk about and to bring together these ideas of rights and faith into the same sphere and to be able to talk about it. So what does our faith, what does our spirituality have to say about the protection of children, the well-being of children? What have we done historically? How do we build on that? And then sort of how do we link that to language that you might find in the international instruments? So it was sort of through relationship, and I think through, I guess, being willing to listen to what was important to the people and to the community that we were working with. I think that we were able to find that was the dialogue that mattered. That was what was important to I guess, to people on the ground, and a really important thing to grapple with. What would it look like to promote and empower the well-being of children, again, through the lens of faith, through the lens of spirituality, and how do we have those conversations? So again, that sort of for me sits within that idea of cultural responsiveness, cultural safety. And I think I have talked way too much. And, you know, I'm sure that there is just so much incredible collective wisdom in this virtual room. I would love to, you know, hear from everyone, you know, and everyone's journey, and would love to hear from people. So if anyone would like to reach out and to connect, I would love to hear, you know, other people's experiences around working and being a social worker, I guess, in these contexts. But thank you, Prisca, and the team for bearing with my big PowerPoint presentation. And yeah, I'll hand back if that's okay.
Thank you so much, Molly. Rin, would you like to say anything, or shall we pass the next?
Yeah, please go.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I think we could give Sonali an extra hour. That would be interesting to follow and learn more. With this cultural part that we have learned from Sonali, I'm also interested in passing it over to Bobby Timothy. He's a social worker in Papua New Guinea. I cannot see him right now. Let's see. So Bobby, if you can open your microphone and camera. Let's see. Is this Bobby?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. So how is your internet connection today?
So interactivity. Yes. So, actually, need myself as so presentation. Optimally and properly beginning the possibility.
So I'm not hearing you well. Is it like Rin, is it the same for you? So okay, so Bobby, it seems like the connection is not strong right now. So try it once again, and if it doesn't work, then we go on with the next presentation and come back to you and try it again. So I know that this is sometimes difficult with this internet connection. So try once more, and I would interrupt you if it's not working well. Bobby?
Oh, sorry.
Mm.
Oh no.
Yeah,
No.
unfortunately, I think that the connection issues continue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe then we get back to you, Bobby, after two other presentations, so that we will see whether it has improved.
Mhm.
Thanks.
And you might leave and come back, Bobby. That sometimes helps. Yeah. Okay, so
I will
okay.
prepare for presentation.
Even that we couldn't understand. So maybe use the chat box if you write something that we can read. What do you mean? Okay, we tried at the end. So we go on with Bianca. Bianca, if you can open microphone and camera. Here she is. Bianca is a master's student. She's also based in Australia, but she has experience from working in the Philippines. And we had yesterday morning short exchange. Well, that was my morning, but you afternoon or evening. So I pass it to you. You said that you have a specific focus that you would like to draw attention on. So do you have a presentation you want to share, or is it?
Yeah, I do. I do have a presentation. Hold on.
Okay. I hope it works. Let's try. I'm not sure. Do you have the host function? Yes, it works. Okay, perfect.
Thank you so much again, Priska, for meeting me yesterday and inviting me to be to share a little bit on my experience when it comes to the pandemic response. Hold on. I think it's sharing weird. Hold on. Is this better?
It is good. It is, we see like, now it is getting better now. Just full size, like full screen, and then it's good.
Maybe Bianca, you may want to use the slideshow so that you can have a full screen of your presentations.
Oh man, my laptop is going back. Okay, maybe I can proceed with this. Hold on. So, hi, thank you so much again, Priska, for inviting me to be a speaker for tonight. So my topic today is when it comes to pandemic management in the Philippines. So I was a social worker and data analyst back in the Philippines before I pursued my master's here in Melbourne, Australia. So I worked for Task Force T3. So Task Force T3 was under the Philippine Disaster Resilience Foundation, or in short, PDRF. So PDRF is the Philippines' major private sector vehicle and coordinator for disaster resilience. Actually, Philippines is #1 when it comes to world risk, when it comes to the climate crisis. So there was a partnership between the public sector and the private sector to create this foundation so that resources or the CSR of the private sector might be more consolidated, and there's only one source or one point of contact when you need kind of support from the private sector. So Task Force T3. So T3 stands for Test, Trace, and Treat during the COVID-19. So we started that task force back in 2020 until 2023. So here are some of our practical, like one of our tools and one of our practices when we did during the pandemic. So the first one is data. So data was very much important to us. So from the get-go, we tried to collect all of the COVID cases, COVID deaths, and the vaccination. So during the 2-year period that we covered here, we know that there were 4 waves. Particularly here in the Delta wave, we noticed that there was a spike in August 2021. So the vaccination actually came to the Philippines in 2021, and then since they know that, oh, the vaccines are coming in, it's a cure for COVID, we can go out anymore, we don't have to quarantine anymore. So that kind of spiked up the cases. So the vaccination wasn't that quick to lower the cases. So that actually increased the number of cases nationwide. So in order for everyone to go out and not being quarantined anymore, we talked to the private sector as social workers that there needs to be something done. So a lot of people during the pandemic lost their jobs. They were not able to sustain their families. They were not able to feed themselves. So we marketed the vaccine is a way for us to have a better Christmas in 2021 compared to 2020. So we talked to different food organizations, we talked to different malls, we talked to different major transportation companies, and talked to them like, for us to have a better Christmas this 2021 compared to last year, let's all pull in our resources, talk together, talk to our employees, their families, and how we can work together. So in 2021, we had actually the largest number of vaccinations. So to have a better Christmas, we actually pushed for the vaccination. So we tried to make it more understandable. We tried to like fight fake news about it and all. And as we can see here, the number of unvaccination of people who didn't have the vaccine were actually going down. So that was very important for us to check that our strategies, are we talking to the right partners to push for a better Christmas and all, was actually working. So these are one of the pictures that we had during the 2020 pandemic. So a lot of children were actually facing malnutrition. So many of their parents weren't able to find work, so that affected their health, their education. They were not able to go to online school, and that really affected their mental, physical, and psychosocial health. There were also jeepney drivers. So these are one of our informal transport system. Since it was quarantine, many of them actually lost their jobs. So what they did was just try to beg on the roads. So as social workers, it was really heartbreaking to see this happen, because we know that they're very hardworking. You know that the money they earn is really just from a hand to mouth experience. So we try to talk with the public sector and private sector on how else can we support these groups. So we talked to the private sector, and they were able to provide cash donations around 51 million, and then in-kind donations, so it was around 130 million. Then we actually tapped into the military. Since the military is based in different states in the Philippines, they help in the logistical aspect of it. So that's how the PPP was actually an effective way for the pandemic management. So I think there are a lot of slides here, but I'll go over them real quick. So we did have a lot of work streams. So we did have a lot of think tanks during this. So to make the pandemic response as efficient and as quickly as possible. So we want to end the pandemic as soon as we can. So these were the list of our partners. So each month that we were in the pandemic response, a lot of the private sectors were seeing the work, and they were more enthusiastic to also join in and help as well. So thanks to the PPP, so in April, the government was only testing less than 10,000 a day, but with the private sector, they were able to test for COVID-19 for 34,000 a day, and then it just went up until the end of August, since the resources and the logistical support were actually combined. So these were some of the lab equipment that the private sector donated. The quarantine centers, and I think this one was very important for us, was the vaccination itself. Since the vaccines were very expensive, if you're gonna buy it from especially like Moderna, Pfizer, it was very expensive. So the private sector, through their CSR, they were able to provide donations. So as social workers, we were the ones. So given this vaccine, how are we going to convince the people to actually take it? How are we going to convince them that this is for their health and all? So that was the kind of like challenge of social workers back then. So what we did is we talked to the local mayors. So like what are your initiatives? Like what are your incentives for your citizens to get vaccinated? So we talked to the local leaders of each community, and if they can hold webinars or they can hold like safe town hall sessions on how they can support their community when it comes to the vaccination. And also this was an avenue for different community leaders or different community mayors to actually come together and pool in their resources. So this is where we see where social work needs to be multidisciplinary, but also there needs to be partnership, because communities, they're not in silos. Like people interact with different cities as well. So it's important for leaders to also interact in how they can support all communities. So we were able to document all of the best practices here. So there's a bit.ly link here if you want to check it out. So one of the practices we also did was to be inclusive of people living with disabilities. So especially for the deaf community, since many of the resources during the COVID-19 was digital and they didn't have captions on it. So we tapped to the Department of Health and consulted the Filipino deaf community on how we can make it more inclusive. So we had a specific town hall sessions just for them on what COVID-19 is. Is it just a cough? What is a vaccine? Is it good for me? Will I get sick on it and all? So we had that specific session where the deaf community asked all of their questions and then provided them all of the resources that they need so that they can understand COVID-19 a lot better. So we had a radio session as well for the people who are blind. And then we also had a special vaccination for the homeless population. So during 2022, we think that we've vaccinated almost everyone, or 80%, but we noticed that the cases are still high. So we noticed the homeless population, the cases are still high because most of the homeless population weren't vaccinated yet. And then when we interview as social workers, we interviewed the homeless population why they haven't gotten vaccinated. It's because they haven't got their ID, their national ID yet. So when you get vaccinated in the Philippines, you actually need your national ID so that they can identify you. But being the homeless population, you don't have some sort of identification. So we interviewed them, we provided them the basic necessities like food and water, and then help them actually get a form of identification so that they can get vaccinated. So sad to say that it took a vaccine for them. It took the vaccine for them to get these basic necessities, but we're very much happy that we were able to provide that kind of support to them. So I'll wrap up with this. So these are the lessons that we've learned. So that government is the strongest if which every man feels himself a part of. So we need to utilize PPP partnerships. So it's a very efficient way where we can pull in all of our resources. To be resilient is to be sustainable, to take a multidisciplinary approach. So like we got perspectives from the private sector, from nurses, from the deaf community, from the blind community, from social workers. So it really took a lot of people to do this pandemic management, to be data driven so that we can create targeted programs, and to be flexible and agile. The ground is always shifting. So no one expected the pandemic to happen at this stage in our lives, especially in the digital age, and we did not expect it to last for 3 years. So as much as possible, we have to be very flexible and agile when it comes to our strategies. And no regrets thinking. Since it's very new, it's very unprecedented what the pandemic happened. We must be prepared to take risks. So like it's really easy to say like, oh, I could have done this, I could have done that. But at the back of our head, we have to remember that this was the best decision that we made during that time, given all of the consultations and all. And then always document, document, document. So we never know when the pandemic will happen again. So it's really important to document all of the best practices that we have so that we can do a lot better in the next run. So we did document. So we tapped into all of the partners that helped during the pandemic, and we actually created the book on it. And then this is actually the link. So I created a short article on it. So it's a more consolidated form of the book. But if you take a look at the article at the last stage, I think you'll be able to see the online. So that's all. So thank you so much. I hope I didn't go over time. I'm so sorry about that.
Oh, we have lost time completely. No problem. It is interesting for us to hear your experience, and thank you so much for your presentation. And we didn't expect any of you to have like a PowerPoint presentation, but it gives more information to have something visual as well. And thank you for all this extra work you both did. We try again with Bobby and see if it works now. Bobby, if you open your microphone, let's try it again. Okay, Bobby, we cannot hear anything, so try it again. Okay, I'm really sorry, but it seems that it doesn't work right now, and I feel like this is a really huge problem that we face globally, that being so interested in learning from your experience in Papua New Guinea, and you have attended both sessions, the previous session and this one. I really appreciate you connecting with us. I don't want to lose this tie of having you involved with IFSW. But sometimes in those areas where we want to learn more, and we probably could all learn so much from you inside, then sometimes internet is not stable or things like that. I'm really sorry for that. What I would say is if Bobby and me can later on figure out if we can have like a specific time slot that works better, or if we have kind of something written from Bobby and we put that into the summary that we send at the end. So, after each session, we send all those who subscribed the recorded versions, and I'll try with Bobby to have something shared with you on his experience as social worker in Papua New Guinea. And again, really sorry for that. Rin, I think we can go on in these breakout groups, but we only have 15 minutes left. Shall we have breakout groups, or shall we open the discussion here with everyone? I know we also have Joaquim Mumba with us, who is president of IFSW. We also have Sebastian Cordoba somewhere. I'm not sure if how much is involved, but he's the regional commissioner of the UN Commission. And so we also have other people who are members of our commission. And Rin, do you think we should go in breakout groups, or shall we just continue as a group?
I think we better stay on in this room because time is limited, and then well, actually, I don't think we are that many. So and then just open the floor to the colleagues. And then, as Priska mentioned, that this is a discussion about more concrete ideas, how the International Federation or the Office of the High Commissioner can support the work of social workers in the field, so that collecting the ideas and suggestions, so that we can build our the partnership work the forward, so that so I agree with you to to keep this the planner conversation. Thanks.
Okay. We also have with us Shweta. She is the regional commissioner of our commission in Geneva, and she volunteers to help us a little bit. And she has somewhere prepared. Shweta, what have you on Miro board?
Yes, it's at the very beginning of the chat. Let me paste it again. Just a second.
yeah, the very beginning of the chat, everyone can see it also there. That's
Yeah,
okay.
I'll post it again.
Mhm.
Yes, so if anybody is comfortable with the Miro board, you can just, there are 4 squares with the questions that Priska and Rin has loaded for the discussion. And if you're interested, you can pick one of the post-its that are within the squares and click it and write your experience or any responses to the questions that are there. And for those who are not so comfortable with this means, I think we can just have an open discussion here. That's the idea, right, Priska?
Mhm. Perfect. Thank you. So, okay, while we are getting into this Miro platform, thank you so much, Sveta. We had already one person who was active in the chats, Sung Kung. And Sung Kung, I swear that you can have a few minutes, not too many, and I would stop you if it goes too long, just to give the floor also to other ones. And I say that in advance because I assume you could also explain a lot about the situation of social workers in Hong Kong, but I'm sorry, not only having a short time slot for you, and because I also want to hear, if possible, something from Joachim, if he has something to share, and maybe some others following the questions that we have. Okay.
Yes, thank you, Priska. Yeah, a very short briefing of Hong Kong situation. In 2019, the national security law was passed and implemented in Hong Kong. After that, the freedom of speech and the freedom of assembly was greatly exploited and undermined. For example, some of my friends were arrested and detained, or even one of my friends was being fired by the Department of Social Work of one university in Hong Kong because he was a legislative counselor and who advocated for the development of democracy in Hong Kong. And we believe the development of human rights and democracy system in Hong Kong is one of the very important instruments to safeguard and enhance the well-being of disadvantaged group in Hong Kong. Unfortunately and sadly, they were all detained, arrested. Some of them were jailed without trial for 3 years. They are not allowed to be bailed out. And I'm lucky to fled the situation from Hong Kong to UK now, and therefore I understand that there was a statement issued by IFSW maybe 1 to 2 years ago, and one of my concrete suggestion is there any possible way that we have the continuous monitoring the situation of Hong Kong? For example, maybe every 2 years, we will have the evaluation of the human rights situation in Hong Kong. And then we highlight and we establish and we construct a framework from human rights and other dimension. We have other criteria to tick the box to see whether the human rights of social workers in Hong Kong, whether they improved or deteriorated, or maybe every 3 years, we will have some case study to interview different social workers from Hong Kong or other areas that their social work discipline and practice were being threatened by the government or authority. So that the continuous concern is, I think the first step, I agree with Rose. The first step, maybe we have to issue a statement, and what should be done after the statement, because the statement somehow is the first step to arouse the concern. And after we arouse the concern, we should have continuous action and continuous monitoring. Maybe I think at this stage is a more appropriate collaborative effort that is more feasible and effective at this stage. Yeah, that's all. Thank you, Priska.
Thank you so much. Indeed, an important point. Maybe also something for Rose. If you want to say something, I think we collect first some thoughts, and then pass it back to the speakers. I wrote in the chat that those who want to speak can raise their hand. And I also wonder if Joachim, if you would say something, you had something on the cultural presentation or the part of cultural awareness. And I also know that you're working in this field as well. Joachim, would you like to say something?
Thank you so much, Priska, and thank you, colleagues, for this wonderful exchange. It was, very exciting to listen to the presentation from Rose, and also, the reflections in terms of, our way forward with, our core business, which is human rights as social workers. So I like these conversations, and I think they also help us shape our way forward as we are basically, reviving or restructuring the human rights approach as a federation. And I just want to say, this platform, I think it's a very welcome platform because it provides us an opportunity as practitioners to exchange, our stories, to tell our stories in the human rights sphere. And also it encourages the blending even with the UN human rights. And I think that is quite important because we need to be able to speak to the practice stories and our experiences in the field as practitioners. And then I just wanted to highlight, the aspect of, the cultural sensitivities and all that, because sometimes they may, bring about human rights concerns depending on how a practitioner, carries or conducts themselves in that cultural context. And I think it's important really that as practitioners, we got to document these experiences and share. And I think such experiences should be able to inform how we, at global level, we put together guidelines for practitioners to guide them in terms of how do they, carry themselves, how do they practice, how do they, react when they are faced with some of these human rights threats, in the practice setting. So thank you so much, and I look forward to continue, engaging on this platform. Thank you.
Ring?
Yeah, thank you. I just wrote in the chat box in relation to the intervention made by the Sun Kung from Hong Kong, because the one of the treaty bodies, which is the Human Rights Committee, reviewed the situation of Hong Kong 2 years ago, about 2 years ago, and then made the recommendations to Hong Kong. Then unfortunately, China is not the state party of this covenant, but Hong Kong and Macau are the state parties to this the covenant. So that very substantive review and then very strong recommendations were made. So that this is something that the government of Hong Kong and also all the relevant bodies in Hong Kong should implement and should support the implement. I know that the situation is not that easy to do anything for the time being, but there is a basis of the international human rights mechanisms, how they analyze the situation. So that this should, give the guidance to anyone, including IFSW and then the Hong Kong, maybe the Hong Kong Association of Social Workers have a look and then to see, so that this should guide, their advocacy for Hong Kong democracy and then human rights in this regard. So that this and I think that this is one of the recommendations. And then last year, the Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights also reviewed China, including Hong Kong and Macau, and then there were important messages, the analysis and recommendations contained in the final document. So that I will shortly share the link to the document as well, so that that you can find yeah, the analysis and recommendations from the UN human rights mechanisms. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Rose, would you like to add something?
Not specifically, other than to say that certainly I've noted what folk have said here in terms of the monitoring and the collaborations that that we have and that we need to strengthen and grow in terms of where to from here. So in terms of just a concluding kind of remark, I would just acknowledge the expertise of everybody on this Zoom and all of our colleagues in the broader area of human rights and the profession's involvement in that. And specifically in relation to the proposed revised commission for IFSW, I very much welcome any further thoughts around what the IFSW Commission for Social Workers' Rights might need to look like, might need to include, might need to consider. So any thoughts that you have on that, please do send them through to us as we evolve. Thank you.
For finalizing this session, I would also like to give the floor to Sonali and Bianca, just to say, you know, few words about your impression of social work and the OHCHR. I mean, we have here few examples. You raised some issues that, how do you think can we link your experience to this global level and what the global level could provide to you? I mean, you shared some documents that you're working with, but then is there something that you would like to have more of it, or a focus that should be draw more attention on it? So Nali, would you like to begin?
I was, as you were talking, trying to think, how do I respond? Would you mind sort of reframing that question? Sorry, Priska. I am.
Well, you know, that was a complicated question, and at least three in one. So just want to give you actually the floor to finalize this session, and what do you think, you know, how these global bodies can support you in your work?
Oh, I think thank you, Priska. I think firstly I want to thank everyone again and acknowledge, as Rose shared, the incredible wisdom and practice experience that must be sitting in this virtual room. And I think perhaps that sort of is what's been coming to mind as we've been sharing, is finding ways to perhaps to kind of gather spaces for our collective voices to be sort of collated somehow and sort of used in informal advocacy mechanisms within perhaps the national spaces we find ourselves in, but also when we're engaging in an international context as well. What would it look like to have a social work, a unified social work dialogue or voice platform?
Thank you. And it's all recorded, so not. So thank you for your insight, and it's recorded. So and it's so valuable. And I'm lucky we have you with us. And I also want to ask Bianca, what for your experience, your experience in the field, but also now having your master's studies. I found this a good combination. What would you like the global bodies kind of focus on or offer the social work practitioners?
Thank you so much, Priska. I think like the one, especially what Sonali and some has shared. So I think it would be good if we have policies like in the IFSW level or UN level on the protection of social workers to prevent future abuses. So it would be nice to have like a policy or like a guide that other countries can also review and also adapt to their own policy makings. It would be also good for social workers to be part of these more of these type of conversations on a more global level. So to get more of their practical experience and how it can influence like global policies or even procedures and even programs. So it'd be also good to kind of like have a template on how other countries can also learn from one another. And yeah, so the ground is always shaking, social work is always evolving. So it's also good to have these recurring conversations and discussions as much as possible.
So you're both going into the same direction of having the space and raising awareness, but also creating spaces on national, but also global level to really work together. Thank you so much. I think, Rin, we are coming to an end of this session. That went so fast. That was already the third session. And Bianca and Sonali, Rose, and Rin, Sonali mentioned that we could have a short debrief. Rory is here, so he could also be with us for debriefing. And maybe Joachim is interested as well. I just have to say, and this is really, really sad for this last minute of this third session. It's the last session for this sessions now with Rin. She's next week traveling, so she's not with us. We will miss you a lot, and thank you for so much for having this event that is so much because of you, because of your support. We wouldn't reach that, and I'm happy to continue collaborating with you, and wish you good traveling next week. And so thank you so much for everyone to attend this third session. We're going to send the recordings next Tuesday, as every week, so people can watch it before we have the last session next Wednesday. Thank you so much. So if all of you could please leave the room, and then those I mentioned before remain in this room, and we have a short debrief. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. And just one thing that I want to flag is that this is just the beginning of our partnership. And then I'm sure that the discussion today and then the continuing discussion inform the work for the partnership between the IFSW and OSCHR. And again, it is very good to know that this new commission is coming along, so that there is a huge potential for further cooperation. But anyway, it will continue to the next week and then thereafter. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Shweta, if you have a few minutes and could stay, that would be lovely to have you with us. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, bye everyone.